Yo, so before we start, just a quick little programming note. I just wanted to mention, so before I did this podcast, I used to do a podcast called XO that actually has more subscribers than this podcast, but I put it aside to do this because I had to write a novel. So it's just been sitting unloved for a while, and it's like a storytelling podcast. Sometimes it's about me, sometimes it's about other people. That Roger Swan documentary I did started as an episode of that podcast, but I decided to resurrect it, to start doing episodes again, and I just wanted to mention it because people have told me that some of their favorite episodes of this podcast are the travel ones, which obviously have not been able to happen. So this episode of XO that I'm kicking things back off with is a story from when I was in Japan. So I just thought, maybe you'll like it. If you liked those Japan episodes, maybe you'll like this episode as well. So it's called the XO Podcast, and if you have any trouble finding it, just go to keithcourage.com and there's a link right there. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the story, Black Coffee, that I put in the very first episode. That also came from XO. It's a pretty cool podcast, if I do say so myself. So there's that, and enough talking about my old love. Now back to my current love, how to write a novel. What I wanted to do this episode to kick off the new year, last episode I talked about how things went in the year 2020 for my novel that I'm writing, the titular novel of the How to Write a Novel podcast, Explode by Keith McNally. And I talked about how that's been going. But this episode I thought I'd talk about the other stuff, the other side projects and different various things I've brought up on this podcast. How did they go in 2020? Because I think there's some interesting developments. So one is the Roger Swan documentary that I brought up here and there, this thing that I was working on for years and years and years, this documentary that's assembled out of the YouTube footage of one of the old school J-vloggers, one of the first people to go to Japan and to chronicle their whole trip. And then he unexpectedly died, and I put together like a chronicle of his last 3-4 years of his life based on his YouTube videos that he left behind. It's like this digital footprint that now is left behind when someone passes away. And it took me forever to finish it because I was psyching myself up too much of what if I make it, no one cares? If I try to get this into film festivals and stuff, how does that go? And it just became too stressful. And what finally cracked the code is lowering my expectations. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to put it on YouTube and that's the end of it. I'm not going to think about it beyond that. And applying the same technique that I've been applying to my novel. Just work on it a little bit each day. And then next thing you know, as life just keeps on moving, as the days keep rolling by, just suddenly it's done. It's just like, oh my God, this thing that's been this kind of albatross, this anchor around my neck all this time, it's done. And then right away, cool stuff started happening. This guy from Iwate Prefecture, Japan, who lives in the town Roger lived in when he passed away, that guy had connections to a film festival in where was it? Somewhere in the States? But anyway, all of a sudden I'm getting messages from people like, hey, maybe I can get you into a film festival. And it's almost like that visualization stuff I was talking about. It's ironic, by not visualizing, by ignoring the outcome, by not grasping for these higher goals, they just started happening, which is because I guess the ultimate thing is just, you've got to finish the project. You got to finish the thing and put it out into the world. And maybe nothing will happen, but maybe something will. And the only way something can happen is for it to be done. That's really the most important part. And then the guy ultimately, he did not manage to get it approved for the film festival because it's a very niche topic. And, it's very low res. It probably wouldn't project well. Various problems. The guy was very apologetic, but I was like, hey, dude, that's okay. Just the fact that you tried, that you even went through these processes for this thing I worked on, that's incredible validation. That's awesome. And now I know that guy. Should I ever get to go to northern Japan, I got a connection. And I'm also glad to report that my Roger Swan documentary has over 1,000 views, which I just think is so awesome. Because again, it's like I talked about it at the time when I put it out, but numbers on the internet are so weird, you know, like 1,000 views on a YouTube video is not a lot. Not in a world where, you know, I watched a video yesterday where it was just a guy goofing around with like a Hot Wheels branded computer, and it had like 2.5 million views. You know, it's just nonsense. Or me and my friend Ray, we do movie commentaries sometimes. We did one for this movie called The Babysitter. I never even heard of it. It's a Netflix movie. It's just Ray is a big fan of it. And it was not a very well-regarded movie, but he loved it. So he's like, we should do a commentary about that movie just because no one ever gives it any love. For whatever reason, the YouTube algorithm caught on to that thing, and it literally gets 1,000 views a day. Every day, 1,000 people start to watch that video. It's insane how many views it's got. But what does that really mean? Because the engagement is very small. Like, people are either looking for an official commentary track, not a fan commentary, or maybe they're just looking for the movie itself. But it's like 1,000 people a day click on this thing, and the vast majority of them bounce, you know? They are not hanging around. So it's like, what do the numbers mean? Is that really valuable? Whereas the Roger Swan video may only have 1,000 views, but it feels like 1,000 actual views, you know? Like, the people who watch that understand what it is and liked it, you know? Like, that feels way better to me, but it's great. 1,000, like, I don't know, I didn't think it would actually get 1,000 views, to tell you the truth. And it's only gonna get more, you know? Check in next year, it'll be a lot more. So that's just cool. It's just cool that after all the hand-wringing and worry and putting it off and stressing myself out about what am I gonna do with this documentary, when I just decided to not do anything, to just finish it and put it on YouTube, everything kind of worked out. And the film festival thing is like doubly, I mean, COVID happened, you know, even if that Good Samaritan had gotten me into some film festival and it had gone down that road, all those roads fucking fell off a cliff right after that. So it wouldn't have gone anywhere anyway, you know, fuck it. Everything worked out really well. The other cool thing that happened, so I reference often the nonfiction book I wrote. Like, the reason I had the confidence to start not only working on a novel, but chronicling the process, doing a podcast about writing a novel, is because I wrote a nonfiction book. And just, I felt that, like, I leveled up, you know? Just that feeling of actually finishing a project that big. Writing a nonfiction book about video games, it was a lot easier than writing a novel, but it wasn't easy. It was very hard to do. But finishing it, it's like, okay, I've seen it. I've seen the whole path, the whole route. Start, middle, and end. I've been through the whole thing. All I got to do is do that again now, but just while writing fiction. It's going to be harder. It's going to take longer. But I had confidence because the same process I used to finish that book is the same process I'm using now, and it's going great. Slow and steady. And sort of a similar thing to the Roger Swan documentary. In order to not stress myself out too much, I just put it on my website. Like, I still went through the processes. It's on Amazon. It's on fucking Smashwords, which is neat because then that stuff aggregates. Like, technically, if you go to like Walmart.com, my book's there. It's fucking weird. But I also put it out for free because I just, you know, it was all a learning process. Any expectation of success just stressed me out. It's like, not for now. That's not what's important for now. For now, what's important is that I actually fucking finish something in my goddamn life. And I did. And I put it out, and, you know, it's somewhat popular. A certain scant slice of video game nerd found that book and seemed to like it. But what I didn't know is that under the surface, sebaciously forming, it had more fans than I knew about, because what happened is a sequel to that game came out, The Last of Us Part 2. And bizarrely, despite the fact that The Last of Us is such a good game and so emblematic of how to do storytelling properly in a video game at a like really high level, that I could write an entire fucking book about it, The Last of Us Part 2 just sucked. It was terrible. I hated it. I didn't even finish it. I'm like, this is shit. God damn it, this sucks. And I was not alone. Extremely mixed reception. I mean, of course people liked it. Of course, I mean, the critics in particular gave it glowing reviews, but the fan backlash was significant. And the people who hated it, man, did we hate it. We fucking hated it bad. But what was cool is, as I played The Last of Us Part 2, and I just started tweeting about, like, what is happening with this game? This game sucks. I got to a part where you fucking stab a dog to death, and you have to do it. You can't avoid it. And I think that's kind of emblematic of the game. It's like, ho, we're breaking expectations. We're upsetting paradigms. We're taking you to places you don't want to go, man. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to stab a dog. I just don't. And you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to spoil it. Fuck that game. In the very next scene, you stab a pregnant woman to death. And this is the hero of the game does this. It's like, I hate this. This is shit. So anyway, yeah, I posted on Twitter like, dude, what is up with this? I'm seeing why there's a backlash. This is trash. I can't believe this is the sequel to one of the greatest games of all time. So then a dude sent me a Twitter message who worked on the game. This was so crazy. So it ended up being these two guys who worked at the studio that made that game. They both got jobs there because of The Last of Us and how much they loved it. And it was like, they did it. Amazing. They made it to the company, and now they're working on the sequel to this incredibly influential game. And as they got deeper and deeper into the project, they were like, what is this thing we're making? What the hell is this project? How is this the thing? Because they also hated it. They also thought it was really bad. But they couldn't tell anyone, you know, non-disclosure agreements and just, you know, secrecy. You're not allowed to talk to the outside world about it. And then once the game came out and there was this big backlash, that was one thing. But they said while they were working on it, it wasn't that way. They were among the very few that felt negatively about this project. Within the studio, people thought they were making this great piece of subversive art. So these two dudes were like trying to talk to whoever they could talk to, trying to bring some balance to the fucking process. And they were getting nowhere. They were just getting stonewalled. To the point that they said it's like they felt like they were crazy. Like years of going to work every day and hating the thing you're working on and knowing it's bad. Knowing that the reaction's going to be bad, being just disappointed by this thing, but everyone around you thinks it's great. Everyone around you thinks that you're fucking shattering the paradigm and all this fucking mega horse shit. So yeah, these two guys, they said they were at the, just in the cafeteria one day, talking about like, what are we going to do here? How did we end up in this situation? This is so weird. And it came up that they had both read my book. And they were like, you know, this fucking guy who wrote this book about The Last of Us 1, he would understand. Like, no one around here seems to understand our problems with this game, but this guy would. Like, there's no way. And they said, like, they were a little, basically they were like, you know what, after this game's out and after this thing's done, we got to talk to this guy, you know? We got to debrief with this dude, because we got to tell someone like what this was like, what this experience was. And this dude will get it. But there was a part of them that was a little worried, like, what if, as terrible as that game is, and it is just like in your face terrible. It's fucking shit. Not in a technical way. It's graphically beautiful, high fidelity, the gameplay is great, just the storyline, the characterization, the fucking motivations of people. Just dog shit. They were like, what if he likes it though? Like, what if we are crazy? What if everybody likes this piece of trash? But then it came out, no, everyone hated it. But yeah, the dude dropped me a line on Twitter and he told me this stuff. He's like, dude, like, he apologized, which I thought was funny. He's like, we tried so hard. We did everything we could from the inside to try to steer this ship in a better direction, and we just couldn't. But yeah, we ended up getting on a Zoom call, and for like literally 6.5 hours, we talked about that game and how great the first game was and everything that went wrong with the second game. And they told me all these stories about what it was like to work at the company, and they've both left now. I was kind of hoping we could do it like on the record. I could write something about the second game, but they didn't want to do that. They just, it's understandable. They don't want to be known as the people in the video game industry that just shit on their former employees or whatever. It's just between us. But it was so cool to hear all the inside stories of what it was like and what this process was like and what it's like to be such a strange situation, to be like trapped. And it's like you're making Casablanca 2, but it's bad somehow, which maybe that shouldn't be surprising. Of course, Casablanca 2 would be bad. But one of the stories that, was most personally interesting to me is there is a chapter of my Last of Us book where I talk about the sequel. There was very little information about the sequel yet. Really only one scene. But I did write about that scene and why I didn't like it and why I thought it was out of touch with the characters and how it was going in a bizarre direction and how I was like, I hope this is not actually part of the second game. What's going on here? So that was really all that they had as far as concrete feedback about the second game to offer. But one of the dudes, he brought it to the head writer of The Last of Us Part 2. He had a long meeting with the guy. He went through all his points of stuff that he had a problem with, and he really got nowhere. It didn't work. But part of that was, hey, this guy wrote a whole book about The Last of Us, and here's what he thought about this weird direction that Part 2 is already going off in right from the get-go. So just for some kind of outside perspective, like, here's this, check this out. And it didn't work. It didn't, it didn't affect anything. It didn't go anywhere. But I thought that was so crazy to learn that this book that I just wrote and put on my website, and mostly it seemed like people generally didn't care that much. It was just something for myself, just, to help me level up as a writer, to help me feel more confident. But little did I know, fucking across the country, in another country, actually, across the continent, my book was part of a meeting with the head guy on that game. Just that potential was there. What if, what if that meeting had gone better? What if the direction of the game had been aided by this dude's efforts? And what if my book had helped? And I mean, it didn't, but that's so crazy to me that it reached that level. It reached that height. And I'm like, that's so fucking awesome, because it's just the same thing as the dude trying to get my Roger Swan documentary into a film festival. That couldn't have happened unless I finished the book, unless I put it out there. It's like these things it's like potential that's sputtering, it doesn't actually work. The firework doesn't go off, but it almost does. It almost gets there. And this is like what people always say about the 10-year overnight success. Eventually one of these fucking things is going to go off. And it's so exciting to feel the pre-embers, this thing almost. Oh, this thing almost. Probably this novel I'm writing now. Almost, it probably won't be, but almost. I'll take the almost. The almosts are great, dude. The almosts are still like so much bigger and better than, I don't know, it's so weird because like people's idea of success is like, where's the top? How famous do you have to be famous? You can be so fucking famous. But you can also be nobody. It's very easy to just be no one, to have no one care, to have nothing go anywhere. It's all relative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. To me, just to me personally, the idea that I wrote a book about a video game and it got all the way to the desk of the guy working on the sequel to that video game, and that there was a 1 in a million chance that it might have helped avert this disaster. And it didn't, but that's not my fucking fault. It's Neil Druckmann's fault for writing a fucking pile of shit. It's so bizarre to write a whole book about how genius a guy is and then he just shits in your fucking mouth. But anyway, it's a different topic for a different day, I guess. But yeah, I just thought that was amazing. It was so cool to meet those guys and to talk to them and just, again, I don't know, more connections that I've got. Who knows, man? Maybe someday it'll be handy that I know those guys. And even just that day of just like, because I guess writing that book, it's all just, you just theorize. I wonder what it's like there. I wonder what the development process was like. I wonder how it all worked. And then to just for 6 hours, just get to pick people's brains and just learn so many little details. And to learn that it's not at all what you thought it was. Fucking fascinating, just great. So that's the update on the nonfiction book. Again, just cool, just awesome, man, fucking awesome. Okay, the last thing I want to update on is other writing that I'm doing, supplementary writing besides the main novel. So one of the through lines of this podcast was I was working on the novel and I was struggling to try to work on more than one thing per day. And it was very, very hard because the analogy I came up with at the time that even now, 2 years later or whatever, really still seems appropriate is, all right, I work on my main novel. How hard is it to just spend 5 or 10 minutes later in the day working on a second piece of writing? It shouldn't be that hard, right? It's just 5 or 10 minutes. But that 5 or 10 minutes is the tip of an iceberg, you know? The tip is all you see. The 5 minutes that I'm sitting down working on it is all that's visible to the outside world, to the naked eye. But underneath, there's a giant iceberg. And in this case, underneath is my brain, you know? My brain is already filled up with this one iceberg of this fucking novel I'm trying to hold together in my head. To work on a second thing is a second iceberg, a second gigantic piece of my head that's filled up with this other story. That writing a second story for 5 or 10 minutes every day is not an easy ask. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's one of the neater aspects to this podcast is how that process has developed. Because by the time I started this podcast, I was already on the daily routine, you know? That's why for the first 50 episodes, I did a podcast every day just to demonstrate, like, I finally have got this down and I wanted to demonstrate what it feels like, what the rhythm of it is. For 50 days, here we go. Here's me writing for 50 days straight. Now just repeat that for 50 more days and 50 more days and 50 more days. But there was no real chronicling of the process of how I got to that point. I was already at that point. But what did get chronicled inadvertently is this ability to work on multiple things a day. Because I would start to do it and then fail and then try again. And then at about a year into doing this podcast, I could do it. It's like I'd leveled up again. I'd increased the amount of weight I could carry, the amount of mental weight. I'd increased the number of icebergs that could be in my brain. So on top of the novel, I would just work on other little things also. And I've brought up various different stories, you know, the romance story, the fucking text adventure video game, different little things. But the main one is the story The Knower that I talked about pretty extensively when I was in Japan. I can't remember what that episode was called, How to Have Ideas or something. Anyway, what's neat about this secondary thing I'm writing is that there's so much less pressure on it. The novel is quite a high pressure thing. That's one reason why I only write a little bit each day, is so I don't stress myself out and burn myself out, because it's a giant big project and there's all the worry about oh no, what do I do when it's done? How do I get it published? What if everyone hates it? Da, 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 da. But what's nice is that pressure kind of shields me from feeling pressure about my secondary projects, because they're just secondary. Who cares? It's just the other thing that I work on every day, that I work on even less each day. Just do a really tiny little bit about. And it's like the gravitational pull of the main story has weirdly slingshotted me around to just make the second thing just easier. It's just happening inadvertently now, you know? It's not what I'm focused on, but again, it's just accruing. It's like fucking proteins turning into sugar or whatever. I don't know. It's just a process now that is just occurring. So because it's kind of the side dish that I'm really not focusing on that much, I didn't really realize how well it was going. Because just to jump to the side real quick, so the way that I write is that I do believe in having an ending especially, and I believe in having a general outline, but I don't have a traditional outline, like point by point by point. What I do is I have all my notes, just my random notes that I thought of, just random thoughts. So this could be this, that could maybe be a thing, whatever. And I arrange those in a general order. So for my main novel, it was like 7 or 8 major categories. For this story, it's a much simpler story. It's these 2 little girls trapped on an island. So it's just early ideas and then later ideas as one of the kids starts to kind of go crazy. And then in the middle was just, at night, the one girl tells the other girl stories. That's why it's called the knower, because she's the one who knows the stories. She remembers the stories. She knows where they were at yesterday. She remembers the stuff. And she's the older kid. She's supposed to know how to survive on this island. She's just supposed to know things, but she's not that much older and she doesn't know anything. So it's like this pressure the older kid is feeling to look after the younger kid. But that's it. Just early notes, late notes, stories that the girl can tell. That's all. So I have an outline in the sense that I know what the ending is, and then just for each chapter, if I have an immediate idea, I write that, and if I don't, I just sift through those notes. And I find stuff in the notes that can work, and then I build off of that. So it's like I have a clear direction, but there's a lot of malleability and variability in the writing. So I was just going along, working on that story, do. And just all of a sudden, I guess because I don't have a super clear outline, I didn't know when things were going to shift from early to late. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I was just going along. And I just all of a sudden got to this chapter where I just realized, like, whoa, wait a second. Part 1 is done. I had this experience with the main novel too, where it's like 5 major parts, and these, like, I don't know, the climactic moments sneak up on me. It's really weird. But in the case of The Knower, I just finished this chapter and I realized, like, okay, we're set. We've spent 3 or 4 days with these girls on the island. Everything is established to the point that they have a source of food, they have a source of shelter, they have a routine. There's no one else on the island, there's no animals on the island, and no one's coming to save them, or no one has shown up yet. So I just realized all of a sudden, like, okay, if I was to write more now, more is just more. Like, it's done. Part 1 is done. And I went through all my early notes and just saw if there was anything particularly important, and I moved a couple of them into the latter notes. But most of them, I'm like, well, whatever that stuff was, I guess I didn't need it, because I never did use it. Just put it aside in a slush folder, and that's the end of that. And like I said, I wasn't sure how we were going to get from early to late, but I realized it's just going to be a time jump. We spent all this time in the first 3 or 4 days. Now we're going to be part 2 4 months later. Just bam. Just jump way ahead. Because that's a lesson I actually learned from that first Last of Us game. Sometimes the most effective way to get your characters from A to B is just to jump. Just to jump straight to the future and let the reader or the audience fill in the blanks, because they will fill in the blanks better than you could. Like, instead of me trying to somehow, I don't even know how I would. How would I write my way through 4 months? It would be crazy. And there's no need. Like, now that the situation is established, the characters are established, their personalities are established, it's very easy, theoretically, for a reader to just fill in those blanks, to fill in those 4 months, and to imagine the things that have happened in the meantime. And then I looked at it closer, because I'm like I always thought of it as the smaller story. It's going to be my novella rather than my novel. And I realized that just inadvertently, again, just by working on it the teeniest little bit as a secondary project, it has very short chapters. The chapters are like a page or 2 mostly, but I have 60 chapters. What the fuck? I got like 100 pages of this thing, if not more, probably more. This thing's not going to be as short as I thought it was going to be. It's already way bigger than I expected, and like 60 chapters? How did I just write 60 chapters? But it's because I've been working on it for 2 years, you know? Like, I've been working on it alongside the main novel. But it just feels like free work, like work that I just did by accident. I'm like, this is crazy. I can't believe how much I've got done. This is nuts. But what's weird still, what's double weird, is there's that great feeling of like, wow, part one's just done. Whoa, I didn't expect that. I got all this work done. It's way more than I thought. I'm just like, wow, bing, bang, boom, zippity zam, everything's great. Until I realized like what this means, the full scope of this. Because as I described when I talked about this story, the real idea of this story, the real theme behind it, is not pleasant. Like, this early part, kind of weirdly exciting in that, you know, Lord of the Flies, Robinson Crusoe, Treasure Island way. That these girls got stranded on an island, and it's like, yeah, that's bad. But I distinctly made it like not dangerous. Like I was saying, there's no animals. It's set in the near future, so they have this machine that just makes bland Cliff bars basically, and they just have food. And there's just not a lot of danger. Because I didn't want that to be the struggle. I didn't want the physical side to be the struggle. The real point of this story, the real reason that I'm writing it, I'm gonna skirt past this quick because it just makes me upset to even think about it. I just hate talking about it. Is that my brother has schizophrenia, and he's had schizophrenia for 20 fucking years, and it's been horrifying and awful. Just the worst thing ever. But I thought, you know, it's an experience, right? It's something I can bring into my writing. Like, what if that's what happens to these people? What if the younger girl develops essentially schizophrenia, and the older girl is just at a loss as to like, what do I do? So it's like psychological survival in this Lord of the Flies scenario. Nothing's gonna eat them. They're not gonna run out of food. Because just the nightmare of dealing with a crazy person is so much worse than any physical problem I've ever had in my life. Like, it's the worst. But the thing is, that's the big picture, right? Like, you know, when I conceptualized of this story, that was the idea. But for the last 2 years, I haven't been writing that. You know, I've got a bunch of notes for it, and I'd have little ideas. But the actual writing was like, let's try to find a water source, or let's go explore down by the fucking whatever, and let's just tell stories at night and stuff. Not particularly unpleasant. But now it's like 4 months later, and I mean, the idea is to just kind of like slap people in the face with how much worse things are. Where the schizophrenic kid, the kid who's unraveling, is like not wearing shoes anymore, and has got like, is all filthy and twigs in her hair, and like won't let the other kid look after her. And yells and screams anytime, you know, like you try to fucking interact with her or get close to her. And she's like, basically, to the sane kid, there's 2 of them on the island. But to the schizophrenic kid, who knows, you know? That kid is seeing things. That kid doesn't know who's real and who isn't. And it's just so immediately awful and immediately terrible and immediately unpleasant that I'm like, oh, what was I fucking thinking? What the fuck? What was I thinking? Why did I think this was a good idea? This is just suddenly now, this is already my real life. Why do I want to write about this? This is a fucking nightmare. This is horrible. This is not fun. So it just like in the same fucking in one moment, I'm like, wow, I'm done part one. I can't believe how well this is going. It's like an accidental second book that I'm just like half finished. And then in the very next beat, it's like, oh, wait a second though. I have set myself up a horrifying trap of fucking misery. I don't want to go here every day. I don't want to work on this every day. I don't want to do this, you know? Why did I think this was a good idea? So that's just a weird one. That's just a weird one where it's like, I thought it was a success. I thought that was like, oh man, here's an extra bonus cool thing that happened in 2020. But then I'm like, oh man, though, fuck. Yeah, write about schizophrenia. That's a good idea, you fucking idiot. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Like, I really think maybe I should just shelve it. Like, maybe it is... Like, maybe this isn't something I should be writing at this point in my life, when I'm still, like, in the throes of it, you know? I don't know. Like, I don't even know where to begin with my brother. Like, what's going to happen when my parents pass away? Am I supposed to look after him? Because he fucking threw a root beer in my face, like, a month ago. He's insane. I hate him. I hate dealing with him. But I know it's not his fault. He's fucking crazy and he refuses to fucking... In Canada, you can't like forcibly commit people. You can't make them do what they don't want to do. So we can't get him on medication. We can't get him to talk to anybody. It's just horrible. It's 100% top to bottom terrible. So maybe like this isn't... Like what kind of hubris is it that I think I can write about this now? Like... Maybe this is something I should do when I'm like 80 years old, you know, when I've really got perspective on it, when I can really look back on the tragic tale of my dumb fucking brother. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I'm like talking myself out of it right now. I'm like, yeah, I should stop working on this. I don't like it. I don't want to do this. Because even like my fucking main novel, like I don't want to do stuff that's just a downer. I want it to be kind of exciting. Like even though my main novel is about this like depressed war orphan, but it's kind of like that Happy When It Rains, you know, kind of fucking Smashing Pumpkins, fucking the world is a vampire, you know, feels good to feel bad type of thing. And even though the whole fucking story is about her blowing up a space station, but she's not going to kill anybody, you know, it's still kind of like a popcorn version of like subversive fucking rebellion. It's like, it's just for show. It's a lot of flexing. It's not actual horror and terror and bad shit happening. Where this story about the two girls on the island, it just is. There's no nice way to spin this. There's no way to make it like a fun adventure in any way. It's just fucking depressing. It's just fucking sad and awful. I was like, what the fuck were you thinking, dude? Why in the fuck? Why did you even start working on this? What the hell did you think was going to happen? But I guess it's that I never really thought I was going to get here, you know? I don't know. It's just... had ideas for a story and I was just working on it and it's like, you know, I guess we'll just work on it on the side and see what happens. And then all of a sudden, whoa, hey buddy, you did it. You're halfway through. Uh-oh, nightmare zone. You ready to face up to every horrible fucking problem in your family? Are you ready to do that? Because that's where you are now, you stupid dick. That's what you set up for yourself, you fucking moron. Ugh, how terrible. It's a shame too, because it's turning out so good. It's such a cool book, but ugh. Because I guess, I mean, that's the thing too, is like, I can only write things that I feel are psychologically real, you know? I don't want to fucking fake people out and just be, like, there's no solution here. She's not gonna fucking find some berries and leaves and mix them together and make a magical fucking potion that fixes a kid's schizophrenia. It's just gonna get worse and worse and worse and worse. Yeah, I don't want to do that, man. I don't want to write that. That's fucking, ugh. Ugh. Yeah, I guess it's weird too because I didn't have a clear notion of how I was going to get from point A to point B. I just knew I had the early notes and the late notes. It wasn't until I got here that I'm like, oh, you know what should happen is a big time jump. It should be a big, just bucket of cold water in the face of just like, boom, whatever fun you were having, whatever excitement there was in this story, it's gone now. But I'm doing that to myself too. It's like I'm just off the deep end. I'm just over my head all of a sudden. Because like the way I've got it lined up in my little notes, like it just gets real bad. Like I think I've said it before, but that statistic, of like people are kind of scared of crazy people or drug addicts or whatever, but those people are way more statistically likely to be the victims of violence than to perpetrate violence. And I've just been there with my brother so many times because I don't know, he's like not a reasonable person. He's a whirling dervish. He's a demon. He's the worst. And like when he throws a drink in your face, what am I supposed to do? I want to break his fucking face. I want to drown him, but you can't, you just can't. But man, he's just like the least sympathetic, crazy person you could ever imagine. Like he's just... So anyway, it's obviously going to be like that in the story too. It's just going to come to blows. It's going to be like, I can't deal with you anymore, crazy kid. I'll just tell you the ending, because fuck it, man. At this point, I don't even think I'm going to write it. Eventually, rescue comes. But the younger girl, being crazy, runs away and just runs off into the woods. So older girl runs off after her, and it just finally escalates to like smashing her head with a big rock, because it's just like, fuck you, you fucking little crazy fuck. Fuck you, fucking come with me to the goddamn rescue helicopter, you fucking asshole. Fuck you. Bam. Rock to the head. I hope you're not dead. Drag you the fuck back. Just like, I can't fucking handle this anymore. And then the rescue guy, they bandage up this unconscious little crazy kid, and the rescue guy just says like, you should be proud. You should be proud of yourself that you protected your friend, you kept your friend alive. And the older girl just bawls her head off, Oh. I guess it's because I have this kind of fantasy of like, because obviously I bring up a lot of times like movies, I visualize stories as a movie. And it always like rubs me the wrong way in movies when like the second the credits hit, people are just up and they just leave, they're just like, oh, whatever, move on to my next little neurotic part of my day. Where like my fantasy about really any story I write is if it were a movie, I want those credits to hit, and I know that 99 people out of 100 will just do that very thing. They'll just get up and they'll get out and they won't think twice about it and it will mean nothing to them. But there'll be that one person who just can't get out of their seat because they're just crying uncontrollably, I want to find that one person that's had that one experience that no one has ever talked about, or no one has, addressed. No one has ever touched that little sore spot inside them. I just want to touch it. Because it hurts and it feels bad, But at the same time, at least you know somebody fucking saw what was happening. Somebody else knows what that's like. But yeah, like I said, I don't think I'm ready for this shit. This is something that maybe needs to come later. No matter how old you get, it's just not old enough, man. Writing is definitely just something that age is certainly not a problem. Like, there's so many things in life that you feel like, oh, I'm getting too old. I'm getting too old for this, getting too old for that. Writing is the opposite. You're too young for this. You're too young for that. You need more experience. You need more perspective. And yeah, there's certain things that I'm just seeing, like, not nearly old enough yet. Not there yet. Fuck me. All right, let's pick it up a little bit for let's play a song that is not a big dour fucking sad sack fest. I want to play Freeze Me by Death From Above. Has the line Ringing in the New Year in it. That's good enough. That's a good enough reason, and it's a great song. Thank you for listening to the fucking Psychology Hour with Keith. I hope everything's going well for you, whoever you might be. Fucking just keep on keeping on, man. See you next time.